Did Mila Falcha. Welcome back to Irish Granny Tarot. This is video number 2 of Sasquatch Nation. Let's just get to it. Chapter 5, the Heyday years, 1950 to 1999. Roger Patterson, our hero, wrote, "Do abominable snowmen of North America really exist?" in 1966, and David Childress went and heard him talk about it. He interviewed a guy called Fred Beck. Fred and a friend shot a Bigfoot in the head 3 times, but it got away. And it came back at night with others and tried to break into the log cabin they were in all night long. There were footprints everywhere outside the cabin. 1952, in the summer, in Terrace, British Columbia, a Bigfoot was walking on the side of a main road to town, just walking along, looking at the cars. Numerous people saw this, called the police. Wasn't an escaped gorilla. 1953, Oyster River, 20 miles from Courtenay, British Columbia. A guy who was camping saw a creature on a logging road, 8 feet tall, hairy, ape man. 1954, an expedition from New York City's Explorers Club came for the purposes of seeing what they could find, and found large human-like prints in the snow of the ice fields of Homathco Coast Mountains, British Columbia. I hope I said that right. And they made this speculation, which I think is really interesting, and this is mentioned a number of different times, that Bigfoot actually, in northern climates, in the winter, in the tops of mountains, in the ice fields, uses the environment to preserve food. It freezes food. And they wonder if that's what they were doing, preserving food in the ice. Wolverines do this. We know this 100% for sure. 1955 in British Columbia, a guy called Roe, R-O-E, was on a work crew, took a break to explore a deserted mine. He saw a 6-foot Sasquatch, at least 300 pounds, with very long arms to the knees. It was a female. It was eating leaves, and it was eating leaves by stripping them in its mouth. And they later found scat, and they said it seemed like it was a vegetarian. 1956, 2 campers in Michigan were grabbed by a smelly creature while they were sleeping, and a third guy shot with his rifle. The creature dropped the guys and ran. 1957, Bend, Oregon. Hunters shot a deer, and a 9-foot hairy creature came out of the woods and carried off the deer before they could get to it. They shot at it, but it kept going. 1958, Bluff Creek, California. Jerry Crew finds the Bigfoot prints that instigated the name Bigfoot. 1959, near Roseburg, Oregon, 2 boys took guns to go hunting. They found a Bigfoot, stumbled on it. They shot it, but it chased them and they ran away scared. They said it was 14 feet tall. Reported this to the police, and it was in the paper. The tracks were 13 inches deep into the ground. And a normal person, a normal man, his tracks would be 2 to 3 inches. These were 13 inches deep. Pretty heavy. Later in 1959, a skeleton of a 7-foot tall thing was found and given to the natives to bury in the same area. 1960, John Bringsley met a Bigfoot while picking huckleberries in British Columbia. He was paralyzed by fear. The creature was 8 feet tall, hairy all over, flat face like an ape. It had hands, not paws. It had no neck. He came out of his paralysis, ran to his car, and drove away. When he went back with friends later, they found prints 17 inches long. David Paulides tells many stories of people, especially children, disappearing while berry picking. Some are found later in weird places. For example, they'll be found in the center of many acres of berries so thick that the rescuers need to use scythes and axes to cut their way to the child to rescue it. The child has no scratches on it whatsoever. And some are never found. And they have weird stories about being carried off by a mama bear who takes care of them, or a monkey that takes care of them. He never says Sasquatch, but 1961, hunters in Oregon returned to get the deer that they shot, and it had been dragged away. It was dark, and they used flashlights, and when they used their flashlights into the woods, they got eye shine, which is something they talk about a lot in regards to Bigfoot. Certain animals, when you shine a light, you get a glow back. It had human features, but it looked like an ape. The guy with the light is 6 foot tall, and he had to point the light up to look at this creature. They escaped to their car and fled. 1962, in the Oregonian Journal newspaper, 3 guys in a car in a remote Cascadia wilderness saw a hairy white creature 10 feet tall walking rapidly along a road, was caught in their headlights. They were too far to go back, so they just kept up on their trip, and then they did tell the cops later. Then a fishing couple also saw it, same place, around the same time, but they saw it at the river. The Klallam tribe of Washington State has the tradition of hairy giants in the area of the Cascades near Mount St. Helens. They call it, and I don't know how to pronounce this, I'm going to do my best, sorry. Selatik or Selatik. Selahtik. June of 1962, near Fort Bragg, California, a guy woke up from barking dogs and saw a dark creature looking at the dogs over a 6-foot fence. He got his gun and a light, and he got his brother-in-law, and they ran face-to-face into an 8-foot Bigfoot. 8 foot tall. He says that he let out a scream and stepped backwards, and as he stepped backwards, he fell. So he came into the house on his hands and knees, going like mad. My wife was at this time holding the screen door open for him to come in. I heard the commotion. I ran to the inside door we have here before you step onto the porch. And he's talking about the brother-in-law. And as he came through the door, I saw this large creature going by the window, but I could see neither its lower body nor its head. All I could see was the upper part of the body through the window. It was so tall. When he came in to my wife, tried to close the door, and they got it within about 2 to 4 inches of closing, and they could not close it because something was holding it open. My wife hollered at me and said, "Hurry, get the gun, it's coming through the door." Of course, by the time I was standing right behind her, here on this door leading to the porch, and I said, "Well, let it through and I'll get it." At that time, the pressure went off the door, and I shut the door and threw the lock. And I walked to the window and put my hand up to the window and looked out so that I could see out into the yard because it was still dark and it was raining. And this creature was standing upright, and I would judge it to be about 8 feet tall. And it walked away from the house back out to this little fence we have and stepped over the little fence and walked past my car and out towards the main road. Oh my God. And he approximated it was 500 pounds. It had a horrible odor. It walked upright on 2 back legs. It had 4-toed footprints of 16 inches long. It left a handprint on the house of 11 inches. The Bigfoot was not aggressive, but curious. Early in 1962, a guy called Tom Slick, who was an oil man, put $1 million bounty on anybody who could bring in a Bigfoot, dead or alive. And then late that year, Tom Slick died in a plane crash. So nothing came of it, but people had more interest. 1963, a guy in a tent in British Columbia had a head come through the flap of the tent with a monkey face. And by the campfire, he saw 4 Bigfoots hiding in the nearby grass. So this thing looked in and ran away. He got up went to the campfire and could spot 4 others hiding in the tall grass. And they got up and they went into the trees, and he found a handprint, and the native guide that saw it said, "Oh, well, that's a Sasquatch." At Sisters Lake, Montana, 1964, in the berry fields, a 9-foot tall Bigfoot in a nearby swamp was seen by the seasonal workers, and they all started quitting. So they had hired workers for the season to pick berries. There was a nearby swamp, and every day a few of them would quit, and then more would quit, and more would quit, and more would quit, because they kept seeing Bigfoot and they got freaked out. Until pretty soon they had no workers left. June 9th, a fruit picker and a friend in a car saw Bigfoot and got out and chased it into the woods. It was 9 feet tall. It looked like a gorilla, and the guys fled. The owners of the berry farm said that Bigfoot prowled the property. That was not uncommon. And they had a dog that chased a Bigfoot into the woods, and this is really weird. This dog went into the woods with 2 brown eyes chasing a Bigfoot. When it came back, it was freaked out, and it had one blue eye and 1 brown eye. And weeks later, the blue eye returned to brown. I'm not making it up. It was in the book. June of 1964, some girls, 3 girls, 13 years old, ran into Bigfoot in Michigan near the Sisters Lake, so same place. 2 froze in place, 1 fainted dead away, and Bigfoot left, didn't bother them. It turned the entire area into a circus, though. Bigfoot was never spotted, but there were all sorts of monster hunters who came. This is Sisters Lake, Michigan. 1964, Northwest California, a guy was car camping. He woke at 1 o'clock in the morning with his car moving, and he thought it was an earthquake, and he was shocked to see a large hairy creature shaking the car. He beeped the horn, and the creature went into the woods on 2 legs. 1965, in a remote wooded area of southeast Michigan, it was hot, and these people driving had their windows open in their car, a 17-year-old girl and her mother. A Bigfoot stepped out of the woods onto the road and stopped the car. It blocked the road, and they had to stop their car. It reached in and grabbed the girl by the hair of her head and banged her head on the car, and then it suddenly left because she honked the horn. A work crew nearby heard and came running, and they saw a 7-foot creature. The girl had a black eye, and the creature left a really bad smell that lingered long after it had gone, and this is a common occurrence. 1965, a 14-year-old was squirrel hunting in Fouke. I don't want to mispronounce it. Fouke, Fouke, Arkansas. He heard panicked horses running into a lake, fleeing. And then his dog started howling in a panic, and he encountered an 8-foot hairy Bigfoot. He shot it and ran home. 1966, in California, near Anaheim, by the Cleveland National Forest. Now, this is going to sound weird to people, but let me tell you something about Anaheim. That's where Disneyland is. Until Disney went nuts, and took over, we used to go to Anaheim from Santa Barbara to visit family friends from Ireland who worked on a dairy farm in the middle of Anaheim. Anaheim was citrus groves, dairy farm, and then forest on the outskirts. So it's so weird to talk about Bigfoot in the middle of Anaheim. It was rural at the time. It very rapidly became urban sprawl. But before Disneyland really took off, that area was urban. It was rural, not urban. And when I think Anaheim, I think the smell of a dairy farm. So the Cleveland National Forest, 2 kids reported a small Bigfoot, and then 2 teenage girls were backing up a car to turn around on a dirt road, and a Bigfoot stepped out of the forest and grabbed a girl by her hair. She managed to drive away, but there was this lingering, horrible odor. These things are all reported to the cops, reported to newspapers, printed in newspapers. There's police reports. The cops found a 17-inch footprint. In 1966, in the summer and fall, in Washington State, there were many sightings of this is sad, an old white Bigfoot that was dumpster diving, and kids would go out in cars at night hunting for it and shooting at it, and it was just trying to survive. Many story of bullets just not stopping it, and the only thing that can kill a Bigfoot, something about the thickness of its hide. You have to get it through the eyes. 1966 in New Jersey, a couple saw a face in their window. It was a 7-foot-high window. They found a 17-inch footprint. They found scraps outside of food that were eaten. And one night, they left food after that for a while, and this food would be eaten. But one night they forgot, and they left nothing, and there was banging on the outside of their house. And they found a gray Bigfoot going through their garbage, which fled when it saw them. 1967, Bluff Creek, California. The Patterson-Gilman film is made, and they swore on their deathbed it was not a hoax. 1967, at 6,000 feet in Oregon, there was a sawmill on the mountain in the middle of the forest, and a guy on a break ran into a Bigfoot family digging under big rocks and eating nests of rodents, and he watched them hiding and watched them for about 15 minutes. September 67 in Vancouver Island, British Columbia, near Comox, some teenage girls met Bigfoot they kind of encountered him in the water. I don't know if it was a lake or a river, but in the water with holding four ducks. They were all surprised by each other, and Bigfoot and the girls ran in opposite directions. 1968, there was a plane flying over Yosemite, and two guys in the plane saw a 12-foot-tall biped below. They took pictures. They landed. They found a 20-inch footprint. They have not released the photo. I don't know why. 1968, near Fremont, Wisconsin, a huge hairy Bigfoot was seen near a marsh. 12 hunters were driving deer, which means it's just terrible. They're hunting by kind of making a big long line of people and forcing the deer to move into an area so they could kill it. They saw a Bigfoot watching them, and they couldn't shoot it. One of them said, I couldn't shoot it. It looked too human. 1969, Skamania, near Montana. Oh, I'm sorry. No. That's not MT Montana. That's MT Mount St. Helens. Skamania, near Mount St. Helens. Guys spotted a Bigfoot, and large prints were found. There are 50-plus accounts, too numerous to mention, too similar to mention, near Oroville, California. A white Bigfoot seen at Marietta, Washington. Rochester, Minnesota. A Bigfoot was spotted at the side of the road. A guy pulled over to look at it. It fled, and the guy realized that the Bigfoot had been trying to get a rabbit that was roadkill on the side of the road. 1969, the Dalles, Oregon. Two Bigfoots were spotted crossing a field. In the Shasta Trinity National Forest, a group saw a Bigfoot fighting with dogs and throwing the dogs 5 feet into the air. This is a group of people. When the group arrived, the Bigfoot fled. Near a sawmill in Orofino, and sawmill in Orofino, Idaho, a watchman at the sawmill found 3 different sets of huge prints. He heard jabbering, and timber was thrown, and he couldn't figure out what this was, but there were many reports in the area of a Bigfoot, and interestingly enough, one was spotted with what looked like a wolf, and there have been other reports of Bigfoot appearing with a dog or a wolf or even a cougar, kind of like a pet. 1978, in Ohio, 9 people in a family were on a cabin porch in the woods, and they investigated this weird noise they heard. They saw a Bigfoot with two big cats. Now, I don't know what kind of cats, like cougars or something. And the family called the cops, totally freaked out. The Bigfoot actually came and looked in the kitchen window for about 10 minutes. They locked themselves in. They fled into the house. The cops came, and the only thing the cop found was this horrible smell. The next day, they saw two more. And this whole story was made into a movie in 2015 called The Minerva Monster. And it was a fictionalized version. It's not a documentary, but it does exist out there someplace. 1969, Oroville, California. A guy in a house near the woods. He and his 6-year-old were burning rabbit guts, because that sounds like fun. And a Bigfoot showed up. They fled into the house, and the dogs, that are usually pretty aggressive, were cowering under the furniture and wouldn't come out. When the Bigfoot left and they felt safe, they fled by car to the cops, and they wouldn't go home. They stayed at the cops, and the cops went to the house and found nothing. But the neighbor down the road later saw a Bigfoot. 1969, at Copalis Beach, Grays Harbor, Washington, a police officer was stopped. This is great. This cop is doing a patrol. His car is stopped at night by a Bigfoot crossing the road. 8 feet tall, hairy all over. They looked at each other. It fled. The cop didn't report it, but he was telling a friend in a cafe. It was overheard, and it became a national news story. The boss tried to get him to say it was a bear, and he said, no, it wasn't a bear. I know what a bear looks like, and he lost his job. 1969, in Montana, a guy was cutting power poles in the woods, and he saw a this is so interesting. He saw a Bigfoot, and the Bigfoot was looking at him, and every time he made eye contact with the Bigfoot, the hair on the Bigfoot stood up like a dog's. And this happened several times, and eventually the Bigfoot turned around and walked back into the woods. 1969, in the summer and the fall, at Fort Worth, Texas, a white Bigfoot was spotted by many different people in a nature reserve, and at one point threw a tire at some people who were staring at it. It was 7 feet tall. It tried to pull a guy out of a sleeping bag in the back of a truck. The guy pushed a leftover bag of chicken he had in the back with him at the Bigfoot, who dropped the guy and took the bag of chicken and left. 69 to 71, in Bossburg, Washington, there were several findings of large tracks with a deformed foot, all of the same creature with this deformed foot. And they took this to Dr. Oh God, what was his name? Oh, here's his book. Dr. Meldrum. I'm terrible remembering names. They took him to Dr. Jeff Meldrum, and he confirmed this foot, the way that it was deformed, the way that the footprint was made. This wasn't a hoax, and it was the same individual. 1972, handprints were found in Washington state that were 63% bigger than human hands with non-opposable thumbs. 1971, a guy called Peter Byrne did the Bigfoot Project. They made a movie about Bigfoot, and it was released in Northern California. Peter Byrne was an English explorer and the head of the Bigfoot Project. They discuss Ivan Marks. And this name might sound familiar to you. We've talked about him before. He was very involved in Bigfoot research and the discovery of deformed Bigfoot prints at another time. They cleared up misinformation. They believe that this Bigfoot had been injured by a train. Marks claims he got pictures, 30-second, 16-millimeter film. and there was a trail of blood where this Bigfoot had been hurt by a train. They saw a limping Bigfoot in the area. There were many Bigfoot sightings and many tracks found of a deformed foot. When a copy of the film was shown privately, an 8-year-old son of one of the researchers recognized the place in the film as close to home and not where Marks claimed it was. So they were able to verify that that is indeed where the film was really taken, and they were able to show that shadows on the stills and the video were done at different times of day. They went to confront Marks, and he had fled. They discovered an original unopened can of film had been sent in trust to the lawyer, and when they opened it, it had pieces of torn up Disney films and nothing else. So this was a hoax, and it was shown to be a hoax. And I think the important reason it's mentioned in the book is not all Bigfoot stories are true. People try, opportunists try to make money out of it. But some of the most bizarre ones turn out to be they're not able to prove that they're debunked. They can't debunk them. But this one they could. Marks went on to make a few movies about Bigfoot, and he appeared on TV on the show You Asked For It, October 21st, 1972, holding a film can and claiming it was a Bigfoot film and of a white Sasquatch. And they showed the film on TV, and a primate expert said, this is a man in a suit. This is a man in a gorilla suit. The audience knew it was a hoax. The technical hoaxes of the time are so bad that it helps to point to the authenticity of the Patterson film. No one has ever been able to debunk the Patterson film, and it's been studied by all kinds of experts: photography experts, physics experts, locomotion experts, primate experts, scientists, just zoologists. So many people have studied it. But the time that it was taken is around the time this Marks film was made, and it's really easy to... Nowadays, it's harder. Anyway, 1971, Big Ben was the creature of Sycamore Flat in the Antelope Valley in the Angeles National Forest. 3 students were driving near a campground when a creature ran after their truck for about 20 seconds. Then it went into the woods. By the area and the branches that were broken where it ran into the woods, they estimated it was 10 feet tall, and it was familiar to and seen often by the locals. They reported it. July of 71, in the backwoods of Missouri, 2 women were having a picnic on a forest road when they smelled a horrible smell. They saw a figure like a hairy human watching from the tall brush. They fled to the car and locked the car. The creature tried to get in the car. They'd left their keys in their purse on the blanket where they were having a picnic, so they couldn't drive away. So they just sat there hitting the horn, and it scared the Bigfoot away from the car. It went over and ate their peanut butter sandwiches. It picked up the purse and walked with it, but it dropped it and continued into the woods. And they grabbed the purse and fled. 1972, in Roachdale, Indiana, there were a number of Bigfoot sightings. And this is famous for the July 4th cockroach races since 1981, this area. But in 72, there were a number of sightings. And then more in the Roachdale area. A couple in a farmhouse outside of town heard banging on their walls and windows. The man ran out with a gun and saw a 6-foot creature. These night visits went on for 3 weeks, and they had this horrible smell around them. So the natural thing to do, they began leaving food for the Bigfoot. And the Bigfoot took the food, looked in the window, stood on 2 legs. It ran on all 4s, but it stood on 2 legs and walked on 2 legs. But when it ran, it helped to use its arms. It was curious, and also an illuminated object like a UFO hovered where the Bigfoot went to disappear in a cornfield. All reported by these people. August 22nd, they found 60 dead chickens dismembered with the blood drained but not eaten, and they were strewn 200 feet around. They called the sheriff, and the sheriff included, saw a large animal flee from the scene of the crime, and it left deep trails in a field of tall grasses or whatever. It left a path. The owner and his uncle drove the wife to town, came back and left her in town, came back and returned to see a 9-foot Bigfoot in the chicken house going after the rest of the chickens. They chased it with a gun. They shot at it. It fled. They found 110 more dead chickens. The Bigfoot never came back to the farm. 1973 in Arkansas, at a garbage dump, there was a sudden thunderstorm, and 4 teenagers were sitting in a car waiting for the storm to pass. They heard gravel crunch and a weird scream behind them, and they saw an 8-foot tall Bigfoot and smelled a horrible odor. They saw 3 more as they saw it 3 more times as they drove, like it was sort of pacing after them. And later that night, they found a Bigfoot in a yard at their rabbit cages, it followed them home. And they had rabbit cages in their yard, but the creature fled, and it was seen off and on all summer. 1973 in September 27th, in Westmoreland, Pennsylvania, 2 girls were waiting for a ride on the side of a rural area, and they saw a white hairy Bigfoot near the woods watching them. It was, check this out, carrying a luminous sphere. They ran home and told their dad. They went, but he was gone into the woods. The father followed the thing into the woods. He was gone for more than an hour. He came back shaken and told them, don't ever go into the woods again. UFO reports were made that night with bright lights searching the ground. Reported to the police in the newspaper. October 1973, Greensburg, West Pennsylvania. 15 people saw a luminous object near the ground, and later that night, 2 Bigfoot were spotted 8 feet tall. 1973 November, Uniontown, Pennsylvania. A man walking a dog saw a trespasser on his land and yelled at him. When he approached, he saw it was a Bigfoot. The man had a revolver because of wild dogs in the area. He shot at the Bigfoot, which fled screaming into the woods. His wife heard the screaming, and she said it sounded like a human in pain. She thought something had happened to her husband. 1974, many sightings in Uniontown, Connecticut? I can't read my writing. Mrs. A, on February 6th, was watching TV at 10 p.m. She heard a noise on the front porch where she left tins of food. She thought wild dogs were getting in it. She took her shotgun to the porch. There was a 7-foot Bigfoot only 6 feet from her. She shot it and with a flashlight watched it as it just turned around and ran and completely disappeared. Her son-in-law lived in a house 100 feet away. He called on the phone because he heard the shot. She told him. He grabbed his gun and he came. He saw 4 or 5 creatures 7 feet tall coming out of the woods towards him, and he shot at them. He ran to Mrs. A's house. They locked themselves in and called the police, and while they were waiting, they saw a red UFO over the woods near the house. The cops found nothing, but their horses that they had were completely freaked out. July of 1974, northeast Oklahoma, part of the Cherokee Nation Reserve, a woman began seeing a brown hairy Bigfoot and noticed that it avoided houses that had men and only stalked houses where women were home without the men around. So people speculated about that. She began hiding a pail because Bigfoot would come and place it to block the barn door to hold it open. And they began hiding it, and he always found it no matter where they hid it. And it started to become a nuisance because the Bigfoot started stealing chickens. So one night, the cops came and shot at it, and it was never seen again in the area. But the next year, a few miles north, a farmer investigated noises at an abandoned house close by, and he came within 10 feet of an 8-foot-tall Bigfoot, hair all over, smelled bad, shot at it, and it fled unharmed. There were more than 20 sightings in that same area that year, all reported to the police. 1975, in summer, on the Lummi Indian Reservation in Bellingham, Washington, more than 100 reports were made, and some of the reports were made by the cops. For example, Sergeant Ken Cooper investigated at 2:20 a.m. A storm door that had been torn off in the middle of the night, and it took several people to even pick this door up, and it had been torn off its hinges. And they all saw a black, hairy Bigfoot, 7.5 feet tall. Then they saw two. The people backed off, and later when they came back, Bigfoot was gone, and they found large prints. 1975, The Legend of Bigfoot. It was a film based on the Marx hoax, but it mixes fake footage with real footage. Now, if you remember from our book, American Cosmic, that's how the technology can contribute to the creation of a new belief. And they combine reality with fiction, and it bypasses the rational part of the brain. Very interesting. So there's real stuff in this movie. Not everything in it is hoax, but good luck trying to figure out what's real and what isn't. 1976, April 26th, Flintsville, Tennessee. A number of reports in the area, including Bigfoot grabbing the aerial off a car and jumping on the roof of a car while the people were in it. On April 26th, Mrs. Jenny Robertson was in her house while her 4-year-old son Gary was playing outside in the evening when she heard her son cry. She rushed out and saw this huge figure coming around the corner of the house. It was 7 or 8 feet tall, seemed to be all covered with hair. It reached out its long, hairy arm towards Gary and came within a few inches of him before I could grab him and pull him back inside. She ran to the door. Mr. Robertson, ran to the door when he realized something was wrong outside and glimpsed a big black shape disappearing into the woods. 6 men tracked the Bigfoot, got near enough to fire guns at it. It threw big rocks at them and ran into the bush. The next day they returned to the scene and found 16-inch footprints as well as hair and blood. 1976, a number of Bigfoot sightings happened in Whitehall, New York. 8-foot-tall, hairy Bigfoot with a smell. In one case, 2 guys saw it and called their brother, who was a state trooper. He shone one of those big state trooper spotlights on it, and the Bigfoot fled. In Kimberley, a small skiing town in British Columbia, a woman saw a Bigfoot behind a store and took a picture, and it fled. It was 7 feet tall, black, hairy, and smelled. Earlier the same day, a firefighter and several other people with the firefighter saw a Bigfoot in a field. It was 7 feet tall, black, and hairy, and smelled. They chased it with a car going 50 miles an hour, and it still was able to get away from them and fled into the woods. 6 to 8 other people in other cars also reported it. 1977, May 11th, a remote farm in northern New Jersey. 7 pet rabbits in a barn were killed. The family saw a 7-foot-tall Bigfoot. It was big and hairy. It was brown. It looked like a human with a beard and a mustache. It had no neck. It looked like its head was just sitting on its shoulders, and it had big red glowing eyes. A lot of these reports say big red glowing eyes, and I kind of got tired writing it, so I skipped it, but you can just assume. It was seen around that farm several more times. The kids were taken to stay with relatives, and men with guns staked out the area and shot at it, and it finally fled the area. August 30th, 1977, Anne Arundel County, Maryland. A guy driving at night saw a body at the side of the road and was freaked out. He stopped and realized it stood up. It was an 8-foot tall Bigfoot, and the guy, as it approached, noticed this horrible odor. The guy threw a tire iron that he was carrying. He wasn't sure what this was, and he had a tire iron in his hand. He threw it at it and ran. The Bigfoot hit him on the back of the head as he got into the truck. It almost caught up with him. Then the Bigfoot held up the back of the truck so the guy couldn't drive away. So he reversed the truck and hit the Bigfoot, who screamed and disappeared under the truck, and the guy drove away. September and October of 1977, Little Eagle, South Dakota. A woman saw a Bigfoot near a trailer. Her dogs hid in fear. 2 cops and their sons saw a Bigfoot by moonlight, and then saw another watching. They watched through their rifle scope and could see far, and saw another. In November, the same cops and some ranchers chased a Bigfoot with a truck, but it got away. This is all in the same area of Little Eagle. 1979, Nobby, South Carolina. Nobby is first seen in the last months of 78, and in 79 it began to be seen often near Carpenter's Knob, and that's why it was called Nobby. 3 sisters in a car were near a wood, saw Bigfoot. One got out and approached the Bigfoot because that's the sensible thing to do. It was awful, she said, just terrible. He was big, maybe bigger than her 6'2" friend. Terribly strange looking, wide shoulders, shining black chest. He looked more like a gorilla than anything else I can think of. And there was something white beside him on the dam. I don't know if it was a bird he killed or an empty sack or whatever it was, it didn't move. And I couldn't tell if it was some kind of animal or not. March of 1979, in Tunica, Mississippi, a couple heard a noise and smelled an odor and saw an 8-foot Bigfoot, and a guy and his son the next night got guns and waited. They shot the Bigfoot, which ran. Later that night it returned and pushed on their front door and broke the door frame. In the morning, the family found blood spots and 18-inch footprints outside their front door. April 28, 1979, Barriere, British Columbia. Boys saw a Bigfoot at a lake. It left, and they found a dead deer hidden under branches and moss with its neck broken and a hind leg missing. April 30th, the boys returned with guns. Then they saw it again. It was 9 feet tall, black and hairy, with a human face and big glaring bright eyes and shoulders 4 feet wide. He glared at me for at least 3 seconds. He was 50 feet away, so close I could smell him. I don't know why I shot. I was just scared. I was aiming for right between the eyes, and he went down on one knee and one hand. At first, I thought he was dead, but I guess I only grazed him because he got up and ran away at about 30 miles an hour. It couldn't have been any other animal. It wasn't a human, because no human can run that fast, especially straight up an embankment. They found 5-toed, 16-inch footprints, 9 inches wide. 1980 in Kentucky, in several different sites, they were sightings. Mayskill, Mason County, in October, a white Bigfoot 7 feet tall was seen in a yard. It had a pet rooster by the neck. They chased it with a gun. Then the article was printed in the Cincinnati Enquirer newspaper. It was seen again a month later in November. There was a police report. A truck driver saw a figure on the side of the highway and thought it was a hitchhiker. When he slowed down to pick him up, he was shocked to see a 7-foot ape-like creature with white hair on the side of the road. He called the cops thinking a monkey or an ape had escaped from the zoo. The guy just was driving through, and he didn't know about other Bigfoot reports. He was a trucker passing through. 1980, there were many sightings in Ohio. From the Dayton, Ohio Daily News, July 24th, 1980, in Logan County, the police saw a 7-foot hairy Bigfoot in his barnyard. It was similar to other reports that came 2 days later. I was unloading 8 pigs I bought about 11 p.m. I shut off the light in the barn and went around the corner to see what my 2 dogs were raising Cain about. They never bark when I'm around. I stepped around the corner of the barn and saw this hairy animal. I thought it was a man, so I hollered at him. It took off, and I got some weeds out back I haven't mowed, and they're waist high or higher, and the creature went through them with no problem. 4 deputies searched the area, found nothing. Another guy cultivating a field said he spotted a creature walking out of some woods and striding along a road. He walked over to get a better look at the creature, but it ran back into the woods, and his description was similar to the guy with the pigs. He said the creature walked upright all the time. The Lima Bigfoot Research Team, a nonprofit organization, took measurements in a cast of claw marks found in the Union County farm. The claw prints are about 40 inches apart. The claw mark has 4 toes and measures 16 inches by 4 inches, the deputies said. So Bigfoot was seen on the side of the road in cornfields in Dublin, Ohio, on a golf course, October of 1973, at the Murfield Village golf course. 2 security guards saw an 8-foot-tall hairy monster. They saw it 3 times on the golf course. Then they found a 12-inch long footprint that was 7 inches wide, and the golf course doubled the number of security guards. May 1st, 1983, in Ohio County, Indiana, a rural area, a young couple with a 6-week-old baby had been visiting the grandmother, and they drove home in this rural area. The husband got out of their car and saw a large Bigfoot 18 feet away from him. It was 12 feet tall, black and hairy. It had arms to the ground, and it swung at him. He jumped back into the car. The Bigfoot hit the car. They fled back to the grandmother's house. They stayed there till 11:45 p.m. the next night and returned only with a shotgun. They sat in their parked car for a while. They saw the Bigfoot behind a tree on the road. They shot and missed, and the Bigfoot fled. They filed a police report, and the cops treated them like they were crazy. They were skeptical because there was no evidence. 1981, White River, Indiana. In the Valley Advance paper from Vincennes, Indiana, a hairy ape-man was spotted. Jack Langford, an avid fisherman-hunter, never left a fire unattended until the night of August 22nd when he saw a creature while he was fishing at White River Bottomland, 6 miles south of Highway 50. Roger and Barbara Crabtree say they live in fear of a hairy creature they've seen twice near their Decker Chapel home close to the White River. Terry and Mary Harper haven't seen anything, but something attacked their house in the same area. The unknown assailant ripped and apparently chewed on aluminum siding and tore away part of the metal trim around the back of the house. It left behind teeth marks, blood, and tufts of white hair about 2 inches long. So that's 3 different couples who saw the same thing. Where am I? So a guy went fishing and had an eerie feeling he was being looked at and saw glowing eyes watching him 50 yards away in the water. There was this hairy body with long arms covered with hair. He said it was a booger, part man, part ape. And it just got out and left. He said it made sounds like a pig. The guy says he'd heard the sounds before and never seen anything and didn't know what it was. He felt it meant him no harm, and he didn't want anyone to harm it. He told the cops, but he didn't want to make a big deal out of it. August 26th, the sighting was ripped off the side of a house. It had... the people inside had fans on, and they didn't hear anything. When they came out, they found this destruction and saw blood, teeth marks, and white hair. And they also saw a marks like that 7 feet above the ground near a light. Their dog was freaked out. It hid and whined. They had the blood tested in a biology lab, and it was not human. The hair was lost by the cops. And the people that lived there said, we just don't even know what to be frightened of. A local naturalist said that there is no local native animal that could do this. He went through the whole list. lots of press interest about this. There was a similar event in New Jersey in 1977. They said that Bigfoot looked the same as a booger that was seen in the river by the fisherman in Indiana that he saw walking in the river. The Knox Monster of New Jersey, seen by the Crabtree family, was an ape-like, white-haired, long-armed, seen on the road by the husband. Seen by the wife and the kids in the yard, they barricaded themselves in. They couldn't get through on their party line to the police. This thing was 8 feet tall and around 500 pounds and had a horrible odor and growled. When the police came, they found no evidence and called it case closed. The family moved and got a shotgun before they moved. It was seen several more times in 81 in North Carolina and Michigan, ripped a barn door off its hinges and was spotted. It was a 7-foot-tall Bigfoot. 1982, prints were found in Aberdeen near Satsop River, Washington. Then in Pacific Grove, California, 2 kids in a car saw a 7-foot-tall gorilla-type creature cross the road with long white hair, and it limped. In 1983, in Vassar, Michigan, in May, in the Saginaw News, you could read about a Bigfoot seen by people in a car. In 83, in July, in Hazelton, British Columbia, a 7-foot-tall Bigfoot was seen by 4 kids in a farmyard. The father was shocked. The grandmother said, "Oh, it's probably Bigfoot." Las Vegas, October of 83, a guy, In Grants Pass, a guy from Las Vegas saw a Bigfoot on the I-5. It was 7 foot tall, hairy, and it ran off. The cop report said the witness is badly shaken. 1983, in the summer, in Gibson, British Columbia, a YMCA leader had 9 kids out on a hike. They were followed. They found prints and broken trees 9 feet up. They had to camp overnight because they were too far into the woods to go home. They heard screaming and roaring, and the camp leader said it was the longest night I have ever experienced. In June of 84, in Seattle paper, a report of Lincoln Tree Farm. A 5-foot Bigfoot came out of the woods and circled a trailer. The sheriff's deputies arrived within 15 minutes and said the man seemed perfectly legitimate. He wasn't a weirdo or anything. The newspaper report also said that a neighbor had reported to the police that something terrified his dogs and that his turkeys went bananas. The sheriff's deputy was reported to say, obviously, something went through that area, but we don't know what. Where am I here? In June of 84, 18-inch prints were found in the river, by the river north of Sacramento near a gold mining operation. In 1984, in August of British Columbia, 2 guys spotted a 6-foot-tall Bigfoot near a gravel pit. The men got within 90 feet of the creature and took 3 Polaroid photos and said the creature was trying to climb out of the walls of the pit. It was well over 6 feet tall and walked on 2 legs. The guy says, "I know bears and I know cougars and I know every other animal. I'm a hunter. What else could it have been unless some circus was around and an ape got loose? What else is it? It had to be Sasquatch. This thing just walked like a human being." Ugh. September of 85, in the Daily Herald of Vermont, the Davis family at 8:30 p.m. heard noises in the woods on their property, called the police, found a tall creature grunting and screeching, and smelled an odor. September of 85, a guy in California was deer hunting in Northern California and saw a Bigfoot run full speed straight up a mountain. And he said, "I will not be returning to that mountain." 1986, in Georgia, a ginseng hunter was surprised by a huge Bigfoot. The guy was frozen. The Bigfoot was huge, had long black hair, long arms. It had a left arm and a left leg injury. He said it had a face like a monkey. 1987, according to the Vancouver Sun of Calgary, Canada, the guys were having a tailgate party in the middle of nowhere when a Bigfoot came checking them out. It was huge, very fast, 7 feet tall, and it left tracks. It disappeared into the woods. 1988, in Ligonier, Pennsylvania, in the Echo newspaper. May, a guy was night fishing and saw a large, foul-smelling creature, like a chimpanzee, hairy, aggressive. The guy fled. He said, quote, "I've been a live trapper with 50 years experience. That was not a bear and it was not a gorilla." 1989, Winnick Lake, Ontario. A swimmer was startled by something and later discovered 14-inch prints with a 40-inch stride. 1989, September, Tillamook, Oregon. 2 women were confronted by an object resembling an inverted toy top hovering just above the ground. It was 20 to 30 feet in diameter. It had a flat bottom and a bright yellow-white light shining at both ends. The woman approached to within 30 feet of the craft, and a door opened, revealing a blonde, human-like entity of average height with fair skin and blue eyes wearing a silvery coverall. The woman then noticed from a window next to the door a large, hairy Bigfoot-type creature apparently seated and only visible from the chest up. The astonished woman stared at the object and the beings for a few minutes until the object suddenly vanished. Then again, a report in 89 from Sedona, Arizona. While touring some property under construction in the vicinity of Red Canyon, an unidentified man encountered something that looked like a window suspended in midair. Standing near the window were several 9 feet tall Bigfoot-type creatures that appeared to be guarding the site. The witness left in a hurry. 1991, the News Herald from Hovland, Minnesota. Department of Natural Resources foresters stopped because a large creature was on the road walking, and it wasn't a bear. It was 9 feet tall. It was shaggy, it had red hair, and this guy got some fur off the branch. He waited until the thing went into the woods, and he went to where the guy entered the woods, where the creature entered the woods, and got hair off a branch. He sent it to the University of Minnesota for analysis. He chased this Bigfoot all the way to a lake, and it was cold, and the lake was iced over with a thin layer. This thing broke through the ice on the lake, but it became dark, and the guy couldn't see the tracks anymore, and he left. In 92, the Dallas Morning News from Hamilton, Texas, talked about a family in a car at night who saw an 8-foot-tall, hairy Bigfoot with long arms and fangs go across the road, hurtle over a guardrail, and flee. In 1992, in the Somerset, Pennsylvania newspaper, The American, near Somerset, a man was awakened by barking dogs and saw a man-like shape looking in through his living room window. Whatever it was almost 9 feet tall and over 3 feet wide. It was completely covered with dark-colored hair and stood on its hind legs just like a human. The man turned on the front light and the creature was gone. And there's some really strange pictures in this book. 93, 6:30 a.m., January, a snowplow operator saw a gorilla-like creature, 9 feet tall, about 500 pounds, pointy-headed. The guy was scared to death. He quit for the day. Later, they found 19-inch prints and hair. The hair was analyzed by professionals, and the report said it was a hominid, human-like, not human, DNA unidentifiable. 1993, in September, an English tourist was hiking near Payson, Arizona, near woods by Canyon Lake, and saw a Bigfoot, terrified, and left the country. 1994, there were a number of sightings in Northern California in small towns near Mount Lassen. A Bigfoot was seen on the road. The police were told that the same night, 2 PG&E employees saw a 10-foot creature like an ape that made the hair stand up on the backs of their necks. I don't know what it was, but it had a lot of black hair. It was a clear night, and it was just unreal. If it wasn't a Bigfoot, it was somebody on drugs in a gorilla suit messing with the traffic. Late July, 3 witnesses near the Hoopa Reservation, David Pilotes wrote the book, close to the site in the Patterson film, saw, same thing. 1995, a Forest Patrol officer from Tacoma met an ape-like Bigfoot, took several pictures of it. I took 14. 8 of them were too dark to see. Page 158. Let me see. Oh, and there's... I'm going to show you these pictures. This is a picture taken by a cop. It looks fake, but it's not. It's a real picture taken by a cop. It's been undebunked. It's real. He reported it to Bigfoot Central, which is a thing near Bothell, Washington, and there was huge debate about the picture. It was analyzed. Could not disprove it. 1995, in August, 25 miles east of Walla Walla, Washington, Bugs Bunny knows. In the Blue Mountains, a former Forest Service guy with 2 other people with him, one from the State Game Department, saw a Bigfoot. The guy said that he'd seen it 4 times before, actually, that there was a horrible odor, the trees were twisted, big trees were just weirdly twisted. It had long hair, was 8 foot tall, and left prints 15 inches by 7 inches wide. 1995, Princeton, Indiana, a kid on a camp hike with a group fell behind when he stopped to tie his shoe. He saw a Bigfoot, and he refused to ever go camping again. The David Pilotes books hint that this kid was extremely lucky. This boy may have been lucky in the sense that there are a number of puzzling cases where a young child has disappeared on a hiking trip when they're the last one in line and lagging behind the group. David Pilotes in his books has chronicled a number of disturbing cases where children were hiking with adults and lagging behind suddenly vanished. Searches with forest workers, police, and dogs could not find the youngsters who simply vanished in a moment. Sometimes these children are found dead and missing some clothing, particularly shoes, at quite a distance away from where they were seemingly abducted. 1995, Rathbone, New York, in August, they found prints by a pond, 15 inches long, 5 inches wide, with a 40-inch stride and a lingering horrible odor, with cattails uprooted. Apparently, lots of Bigfoot sightings involve cattail roots being eaten. 1995, a TV crew in Crescent City, California, was sleeping in a gigantic RV when they saw a 7-foot Bigfoot and reported this to Jeff Meldrum, who came and investigated. The guy who wrote this book came and investigated and said it was no hoax. 1996, July, at Lost Lake, Colorado, fishermen saw Bigfoot, massive, hairy, long arms, dome head, flat nose. The Bigfoot saw the guy and went into the woods. In Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, in August of the same year, a cop on night patrol saw a Bigfoot cross the road and made a police report. Skydivers saw a Bigfoot. I thought this was really interesting. August of 96, skydivers sitting in their plane waiting to jump saw a Bigfoot from the air near Kapowsin, Pierce County, Washington. The skydiving plane was flying low near Mount Rainier when the group saw a Sasquatch running down a road with huge strides. As the plane flew over the creature to get a better look, it leaped off the road, ran uphill, jumping stumps like nothing. Once the Bigfoot entered into the thick timber of the forest, he was lost from sight, and the astonished skydivers flew on to their dive. In 97, several were investigated by the guy called John Green that we've talked about before. In Athol, Idaho, a retired CHP, California Highway Patrol, in the early morning saw a 7-foot, 300-pound black hairy Bigfoot on the side of the highway. In Conegas County, Colorado, in August, a couple were elk hunting up high, a place called Platoro. They were in a meadow and looking down on other meadows from up high, saw 3 hikers who didn't realize that at the other end of this meadow was a Bigfoot. These hikers were approaching the Bigfoot. They were unaware of it. The Bigfoot got spooked, knew the hikers were coming, jumped the creek, and ran into the forest before the hikers got there. In September of 97, in Windham County, Connecticut, a woman was riding a horse on a railroad trail, smelled an odor. The horse bolted. She saw a creature like a gorilla man rushing down the hill to her, screaming. She said it reverberated in my chest and it hurt my ears. She and the horse raced away, and the Bigfoot went back up the hill. In 98, in Ravella Island, Alaska, a guy had a personal sighting driving kids home from school clam dig. 50 miles per hour southbound, a 7-foot-tall black-covered, hair-covered biped ran across a forested highway 100 yards in front of my car, 12 miles north of Ketchikan. It covered the center line to the forest, 20 feet distance, in 3 bounds. In 98 October, west of Redding, California, near the Hoopa Reservation, a guy with 6 friends were toasting marshmallows when a huge hairy creature came out of the bushes. It had long arms. It left tracks 20 feet long, 20 inches long, 6 inches wide. If I accidentally see feet when I'm talking about footprints, I mean inches. Feet in height, inches in feet. Feet in height, inches in length of track. 20 inches long foot, 6 inches wide foot. And that night, all night long, they heard blood-curdling screams. Okay, I'm going to end here and start video 3, which will be the start of chapter 6. So thank you for watching, and I'll be right back.